My name is Weldon Dodd. I'm a distinguished engineer at Kanji, where I've been for the last 5 years. So we're a device management solution provider. I think device management service provider. I think that's the new term. My colleague.
Arek, Dreyer, rhymes with team player. Really happy to be here. This is my first time being in person at PSU Mac Admins. Anyone else? Who else is here for the first time? All right, like third, fourth,
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, it's great to see more first-timers, so awesome. All right, so today we're going to talk about the Apple Business Manager API, Apple School Manager API, which is brand new, which is exciting, a lot of fun. We decided to do this talk mostly because I wanted to learn how to use the API, right? And so if I'm going to learn how to do it, it might as well help other people learn how to do it. How many people are familiar with using cloud APIs as part of their regular work? A lot of hands going up. How many people are familiar with using Python 3 and request to do API calls? About a third of the room. Okay, so all the examples I'm going to show are in Python 3, so just keep that in mind, but any concept should carry over into whatever language that you want to use or whatever tooling you want to use, but we'll go through it. So to kick it off here, we've already done our introductions. You know who we are, and this is our agenda for today. We're going to talk through like what's changed in Apple Business Manager, Apple School Manager, why some thoughts around why you would want to use the API, and be curious to hear thoughts from the room when we get to that moment. I'm going to show you how to use the API and kind of walk through the OAuth 2 flow that's required to do it, and I'll show you some examples that we could see it work if the Wi-Fi behaves while I'm presenting, and then we'll just cover what we've done. So, Arek, what is new in Apple Business Manager?
In Apple Business Manager and Apple School Manager, we're seeing a really cool evolution of new features and new functionalities in that web-based portal that Apple provides for businesses and schools. One of the first things is activation lock status is now available in Apple Business Manager. And now if someone returns a device to you that's in Apple Business Manager and it has activation lock turned on, you can go right into Apple Business Manager, Apple School Manager, click the device, click the ellipse in the upper right-hand corner, and remove activation lock. It's as simple as that. Like, let's hear a big round of applause for Apple for doing that.
Yes.
That's huge, right? So not only can you modify the activation lock, not only can you turn off activation lock for that device, but you also have the information about activation lock. Device storage information is now available in a device view. Cellular information, IMEI, EID, who released a device. And one thing that I've heard from people is, hey, we've released a lot of devices over the years, and maybe someday there might be a way to remove those devices from Apple Business Manager, so you don't have to page through tons and tons and tons of old released devices. iPad and iPhone MAC address, not Mac address, but iPhone and iPad MAC address are now visible in Apple Business Manager, Apple School Manager. Same thing with Bluetooth address for iPad and Mac, but not Mac. And soon, there'll be Apple Care coverage information. I don't know when, but at some magical day, you'll wake up, you'll go into Apple Business Manager, and you'll see that. So I've got a screenshot on the next slide from my personal Apple Business Manager. I've got an iPad. Weldon, you can't really see that. Can you go to the next slide so I can zoom in? All right, cool. So I've got an iPad, and this is an old iPad that I released, or that someone released a while ago. So it doesn't have all of that new information. It's got the storage, but it doesn't have the IMEI and the EID. But what I wanted to illustrate here is that the released by, it says deleted user. So if you have lots of people that are doing things in your Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager, you might want to consider not deleting a user if you want that historical record of who deleted or who released devices. So just something to think about, just something to be aware of. But let's take a look at a device that hasn't been released. I just want to show, hey, we've got the a lot more information, the cellular information, and down at the bottom, there's some extra space. So that might be where AppleCare information shows up at some point, but I don't know. I don't know what it's going to look like.
Yeah, we're really excited about the AppleCare info. How many people have used like the GSX integration? So for the viewers later, right, maybe 10, 15% of the room raised their hand. It was kind of a pain to get. There's a lot of hoops to jump through, I'll put it that way, to get GSX access. The requirements to get GSX access have increased over the years, right? And I currently live in London and work with our worldwide operations out of London, or a non-US maybe would be another way to say it. And getting GSX access in Europe is even harder, right? So customers in Europe don't really, in practical terms, do not have access to GSX to get AppleCare warranty info. And so moving it into Apple Business Manager opens this up to a much wider audience. Not only does it make it easier for those of us in the US that have had access to it in the past, it opens up to a whole new audience. So it's pretty exciting to see these changes. It has real tangible benefits to a number of Apple customers.
Yeah, well, let's go to the next slide and talk about some more reasons why you would want to use the API to programmatically grab information from Apple Business Manager and Apple School Manager and do something with it. So lots of different reasons, and we'll ask you in a second, but just in general, automating, like using automations plus API just makes sense. Asset management systems, so not even with your device management solution, but maybe you've got an asset management system for your entire organization to pull information in, like what Weldon just said, AppleCare warranty information. That would be really cool, so that your organization has kind of a global view of all the devices, no matter what kind of device it is, what kind of warranty information, and what kind of replacement cycle you're going to think about. Because all of you are on a 3-year replacement cycle, right? No.
Yeah, all the K-12 education people
exactly
sank into their chairs. Yeah.
Network access is kind of an interesting topic where if you want to automate bringing in MAC addresses of iPad and iPhone devices into whatever system you're using to gate access to your network through MAC address, that's really interesting, but we don't, like I said, we don't have MAC addresses available. So, but Mac provisioning in iOS and iPad OS device provisioning might be a little bit different. So this is not a session on network access control. But speaking of those iOS and iPad OS devices, we also have cellular iPad and iPhone. And with cellular, eSIM comes into the picture. I don't have all that much experience compared to Weldon, so I'm going to turn it over to you, Weldon.
So what Eric's not saying is I actually started my career working with Mac. So I was at the University of California, and I ran the Mac lab and the Next lab while I was there, and that's kind of how I got started. But in the middle, I spent like 10 years in the wilderness in wireless telecom, building network management systems for cell phone carriers and doing things like that. And so being able to provision eSIMs requires you have to have the EID and the IMEI. And traditionally, like, you've not been able to get that info unless, like, if you're shipping iPhones out to a bunch of employees, like, you have to go grab the box and scan the IMEI or take a picture of it, right, from the back of the box, and then send that list to your carrier to provision your eSIMs and get all that ready to go. So kind of convoluted and a bit of a hassle. So this opens up a new workflow where you should be able to query ABM, get the list of devices that have, as soon as the reseller or Apple ships them, they should show up in ABM before they even arrive at your location. You can grab all the IMEIs, EIDs, send those to the carrier, get the eSIMs. Now you can provision eSIMs for those devices, potentially before they arrive. So maybe now you could drop ship those to your end users. They're ready to go. They have an eSIM as they go through Setup Assistant and get set up out of the box.
Yeah. So some other ideas, but for those of you who came to the session, is there anyone who thought, oh, I want to learn how to use the API with Apple Business Manager, Apple School Manager to do this thing? So if you had something in mind that you wanted to do with API, what does anyone want to, yeah.
I want, when a new device shows up in our asset management, I want to go ahead and into the Apple School Manager and assign that to the correct MDM.
Okay, so
Make sure you repeat the question.
Yeah, so so he said when a device appears in Apple School Manager, wants to programmatically make sure that device shows up in the right MDM server. So you can use the API to assign and reassign devices. I'm really glad you brought that up, because one thing that you cannot yet do today with the API, when you reassign the device, you can't yet set the deadline
to force the migration.
Which gives me the opportunity to talk about one of the features that I'm super excited about that was talked about at WWDC this year, which is the ability to migrate devices from one MDM server or one MDM solution to another. And that's great for on-prem to cloud, or from one tenant to another tenant within the same solution, or from one solution to another. And by setting in ABM or ASM, setting that deadline it's just magical if you've played with it in the betas. The one thing with that is that that device needs to be at 26 already in order for that deadline to appear on the device.
And it has to be enrolled in the current device management service with automated device enrollment. So if it was enrolled manually, it will not work to migrate. You can't do it.
So again, devices have to be enrolled through ADE to Apple School Manager, Apple Business Manager, enrolled through ADE into the current device management solution, and they have to be at 26 in order for that assignment deadline.
Yeah.
But
in this use case for assigning devices, though, like today you can do it automatically by device family. So like all iOS devices go to one device management service, all iPad, all Mac, right? But if you want to distinguish between sets of Macs, you can't automate that today. But now with this new API, the possibility is there.
Great. Thank you for sharing that vision. What else? What did people want to do with API?
In the back there, the black shirt, the mustache. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm gonna share this.
Actually, one of the things that we're already working on is building an MCP server for Apple Business Manager, which folks aren't familiar with MCP servers. They allow you to interact with like AI services.
Yeah.
So basically, it would give whatever AI tooling you're using the ability to know everything about Apple Business Manager and all your devices, so you could ask fun questions about anything, all of your devices.
Yeah.
And just have the LLMs do all the fun things.
Right on. The next presentation I'm giving is about Apple Intelligence and AI, but that's a good shout right there. Model context protocol is what's being talked about here. So it's a way for agentic AI agents to talk to each other, right? So it's an API of sorts there for AI. Awesome.
You want to pass that to Damien? You could throw it if you want, but
I have a pretty simple one. Immediately, I just would like a way to have my service desk workers who sit in ServiceNow all day long have a button to push that does an activation lock release.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it should be pretty straightforward, but
yeah,
until we have an API, we can't do it. And now we have an API, and I'm trying to figure out how. So
okay, yeah, right on.
I don't know if the mic picked that up.
So the question was, or the statement rather was, excited about being able to use the API to remove the activation lock from a device programmatically, so that you could build an integration in ServiceNow where you don't necessarily want to give your help desk direct access to Apple Business Manager and have a login there with the managed Apple ID and all that kind of stuff. The roles are getting better within Apple Business Manager, like the granular permissions that are available are getting better, but still, like, you would have to give them the ability to do other things to devices to be able to do that. So with an API, right, you can say, okay, there's a button in ServiceNow, click that. All that button does is remove activation lock. So
That's not possible today.
yeah, it's not there, but look, there's lots of things that aren't. This is the first version of the API, right? We're expecting things to change quickly. Okay. Yeah. There's one more in the back. If you want.
Just releasing devices even?
Yeah, so it's a good shout, because today you cannot release the device through the API. Now, I don't speak for Apple, so I don't know if that'll change or not, whatever. But today there's only two ways to release devices. One is in Apple Business Manager. If you log in the web GUI with the right permissions, you have the right role, you can release devices from the org. Does anybody know the other way?
Call Apple.
No, not quite, but call somebody. Yeah, that's what I meant. You got it. Yeah. So part of the MDM protocol is the device management service can talk to ABM as part of that integration and release devices on your behalf. Just for what it's worth, at Kanji, we did not implement that functionality in our product to release devices from Apple Business Manager, because we were uncomfortable with the amount of warnings that we would have to throw up around that flow, right, to prevent our users from doing something irreversible. And so we just thought, it's better if we just let Apple be in charge of all those scary warnings, right, and guide the user towards what it means to remove a device from Apple Business Manager. So that's still where it lives, is you have to go to the web GUI, or you could allow your MDM to do it.
Any other ideas? These are really good topics that people brought up. Yeah, in the back. Pass that.
I would love the MDM server token updates for both MDM servers and for volume purchasing to automatically update from the MDM side. So Jamf or Kanji can say, give me the new token for this year, rather than doing that manually.
For like your annual renewal. Yeah. So those would be great things we'd love to see that we haven't seen yet. Yeah. But yes, I would like that too. In the back of my mind, it seems to me like Profile Manager did some secret stuff there, but
you just blanked my mind there.
Yeah. I remember there was a couple moments when I was still kind of inside Apple where I thought, this is cool that Profile Manager gets to do this. How come other MDMs don't get to do this? All right. Well, let's talk about how to use it, and I'll talk you through the steps, kind of give you an overview of what the flow looks like, and then I'll show you some examples of it in practice. So I don't know where that came from. Why do we have these? Okay. I don't know where those came from. Sorry. Arek and I were just working on the slides. So just one statement up front. If you get an API token today, there is no permissions control. That token can do anything that's available on any endpoint. Yeah, so just be aware. These are things that we just talked about this. You can't release devices with the API. That's only available as a entitlement to grant to your MDM solution to do. But here are the steps. Okay, it uses OAuth 2. So the flow here is going to follow this pattern. You will create an API account in Apple Business Manager. that will generate the private key. You get a PEM file downloaded to your computer that contains the private key. You'll also need the client ID and the key ID from Apple Business Manager to do that. So let's just take a look at that step. Okay. Let me drop in here. So we'll go to Safari. I've been logged out. Bear with me because the network access a moment ago was a bit slow. So it might take a moment for all this to work. Oh, and hopefully I'll get a text message here. Does anyone know if this trust button actually does anything? Because in my experience, it doesn't seem to. Okay. All right, so we're in Apple Business Manager. If you click on your profile down here and go to Preferences, there is a new entry here for API. And if you select that, you'll see any tokens that have already been created. And if you want to create a new one, you click on the plus button, create API account, you give it a name, PSU, and it just says, hey, data access. It has all access, right? If I create this, it just tells me, okay, this step of creating the API account is going to generate a private key. So you click that, and now it'll automatically download I'll have to click allow, but I'm allowing it to download the PEM file that contains that private key. Okay, so that's the step. Now, if I look at this private key and the account that I've just generated, I also need to get the key ID here and the client ID because I'm going to use those in the request to get I'm going to use it to build the client assertion, and then I'm going to use that to request the Java Web Token. Okay, so there's a few steps to assemble all these things, but this is what we need. Okay, so if I go back to my slides, I'm going to use Python 3 in my examples, so you would need that. With what I've done, you would need the request module, you need authlib, in order to use the private key, and you're going to have to use the cryptodome module for the elliptic curve cryptography functionality that you need to generate the client assertion and get the Java Web Token.
Hey, Weldon, do people have to use Python?
No, but this is just what I'm going to be showing. But you will need tools that can read the private key, sign your client assertion, and do all these things. And Apple requires elliptic curve signatures. And so you just need to make sure your tooling supports those kinds of things. Okay, so if we look at what I've done here, I built this in Python, and I'll just kind of explain the setup here. So I've got all my modules that I'm importing in. I need OS because I'm going to read and write some files as I do this. I'm going to write out I'm going to read the private key out of a file. I'm going to write the client assertion to a file. I'm going to write the JWT to a file. I'm going to write the token to a file just so I can have them available for any troubleshooting I want to do. I'm using date time because you have to put a timestamp on your request when you sign the client assertion. You specify when it was created and the expiration date. So that helps with some of that, like date math and things like that. The Java Web Token ID needs to be unique. You could put whatever you want in there. I'm generating UUIDs to give every JWT a unique ID. There's a library here that understands how to build a JWT, right? And then the elliptic curve cryptography stuff is coming in here from Cryptodome. and requests to make the actual web requests. But now I'm going to start to build the client assertion. So this is something that you do locally. I'm going to read in the private key from the PEM file that I've downloaded. I'm using the client ID, and the documentation says you should include the team ID. It's the same value as the client ID. I didn't bother to experiment what would happen if I left that out, right? But followed the documentation. And the key ID. So just as a reminder, right, those are the details that are here in the API account that you've created. You can find that here and just copy that from here. The URL that you're hitting, like the audience for this signed assertion that you're going to make is included in there. So when you send it, it's recognized. And the algorithm that it requires is ES256. Okay, so all these details are used so that you can create the assertion, and then you're going to sign that assertion with the private key that you downloaded from Apple. So here's what it's doing. It's building the issued timestamp. It's calculating the expiration timestamp. It's valid for up to 180 days. So you can use this client assertion for 180 days. But all those details go into the payload here. So we've got our client ID, the audience, which is the Apple URL, the issued timestamp, the 180 days later, expiration timestamp, the unique UUID that I'm generating here, which could be anything. It just, you want it to be unique to identify it. We're including the team ID, which is the same as the client ID. And then we're using that private key file here. We're building the client assertion using this JWT model to encode this payload that we put together with all these details up here, right? This is our payload. We're building the JWT request with all that payload info, and then we're signing it with the private key. Okay, so this becomes the client assertion that we built locally on device. And here in my file, then I'm just saving this out to the file system so I have it available to use later if I want. Okay, don't mistake this for production code, right? This is just a demonstration, kind of quick and dirty. But this assertion file is good for 180 days. You can use it to request new tokens for 6 months. Now the tokens themselves are short-lived. They're good for an hour. So you could hold on to this client assertion, request a token. That token now is good for an hour. You can use that token. When it expires, you would use the assertion again to request a new token and start over. Okay. Okay, so I've got my client assertion. I'll show you in the slides here. This is, well, first the PEM file. So this is what it'll look like, right? It's just text. It has the beginning and closing lines, and it's got the private key in between. I've redacted some of it, so it's not valid. But when you generate the client assertion, it will look kind of similar, right? There's a few lines that have been redacted here, but it's just a few lines of text that is the signed, so and that's why it's encrypted, right? The signed payload with all those details in it. Okay, so going back to our steps here. Okay, now that we have the client assertion, now we can ask for a Java Web Token. Okay, so we have an endpoint here that we hit for the OAuth 2 authorization from Apple. We have to include this host in the header, but then the payload is some of the same details we've already used in the signed assertion, and the OAuth 2 flow is checking to make sure those things match, right? That, hey, what we're sending for the JWT request matches what's in the signed assertion. So we've got our client ID again, some details about the specific client assertion type that Apple's expecting to see, and then we're sending the signed client assertion payload. And the scope here is business.api. If you're using Apple School Manager, there is a different scope for school.api. And then we're sending the header, right, account.apple.com, with this payload. The details that Apple's expecting are unique client ID and the signed assertion in that payload. What we get back is a JSON file that has the JWT in it. So what I'm doing here is I'm saving out that JWT to a file just so I have it on my disk in case I want to look at it or use it elsewhere. But I'm pulling out the access token key from that JSON. That's the value that I need in order to make API requests. So to show you here, like what the JWT looks like, it's this JSON with 4 keys in it, the actual access token. So this is what I need in order to make API calls. And it has some info about the type, and it expires in an hour, 3,600 seconds, and the scope is set to Business API. If you're using Apple School Manager, it'd be School API. Okay, so that's what the JWT looks like. I need to pull that access token out of the JSON there. So that's what, sorry, scrolled up while I did that. So that's what I'm doing here, is I'm grabbing that one key out of the JWT. I wrote it out to a file just so I have it. It's good for an hour. I could grab it and paste it into Postman or some other tool and use it for an hour, do things like that. But then once that hour's over, I would need a new one. Okay, so now that we've done all that, right? Now we're ready to actually hit the API and get some results. So the details here, like here's the endpoint to get all devices for your organization. The authorization type is a bearer token, and I'm just using that access token that I pulled out of the JWT. And it's application JSON is what I'm expecting to get back. So I make that request, and in the response here, I'm just looking at the JSON, and I'm going to print out the first device record from the result that I get. So if I click run here, what we should see is a device record with a single device record. Woo, okay. Yay. And you can see some of the details here. So the full structure is there's at the top level of the dictionary is just data, and then there's an array inside of that has all of the devices. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm saying, okay, like don't bother showing me that top level wrapper. Let's look in data and let's look at the first item inside of data, which is the first device. But you get to see all the things that you want to see. So ID. What kind of product family it is, serial numbers in here, the order number, color. I thought that was interesting, right? It shows up device capacity, like Arek was talking about. So some of the new stuff is in here. If you look at something from the iPhone family or iPad family that's cellular, you would see IMEI and EID listed in these attributes as well. They won't show up here because it's a Mac, but you've got all kinds of data that you can use. So like, the AppleCare name, the part number, the device model, like the friendly name, all that stuff that you could use to, either match records or build lists or whatnot. We were talking about the, in Apple Business Manager, when you look at your list of devices, you see everything, including all the released devices. Just kind of a hassle when you're trying to scroll through a long list. So now with the API, right, you can pull down all the devices and then filter on if it's been released or not and get to a list of just the active devices. So there's useful things that you can't do in the web interface that you could do with the API that I think will be really nice. So I'm looking forward to seeing some of these things. This one hasn't been released, but like you would see the released by user name, whatever it is, in the details. So you could use that key as a way to like filter out the ones you don't want to see. Okay. All right. So these last two things are interesting. I'll call these out. This right here is the has the relationships or links to other places, other endpoints in the API. So you can, it will provide you with, well, this link is to itself, just to explain that. So what you're looking at is, you're looking at org devices and the unique ID of this device, which show NG6, you can see it up here. It's referring to itself, and it will show you its relationships. But also directly in this response here, you can see org devices, the ID, and you can ask for the assigned server, and it will give you what device management server it is associated with. Okay. And again, that's another link directly to itself. So this is useful because like from this, you could build a second request that just uses this URL, this API endpoint that you got in the first response, and just use that directly in the next request and get the MDM server details that it's been assigned to. You can also, there's other endpoints. So if I go back to our list here, instead of coughing into the microphone, I just paused. But to review what we've done, this OAuth 2 pattern, you generate the API account in Apple Business Manager. That generates the account with the client ID, the key ID. The private key gets downloaded in a PEM file. Now you're going to generate the client assertion locally on your device using the payload details like client ID, key ID, etc., and sign it with that private key. Now you use the client assertion and a request to get a JWT, that short-lived 1 hour token. The response comes back with the bearer token that you're going to use, and now you use that bearer token when you make API endpoint requests. Okay, so what can you do? I showed you the get devices endpoint, and I just showed you one, right? But if I modified that, I would get all devices that are in the list. You can get details on a single device. You can get a list of the device management services that are configured in your Apple Business Manager, Apple School Manager instance. You can get the serial numbers of the devices that belong to a specific device management service, right? So your flow might have to be like, okay, get the list of device management services, now loop through that list, and for each one, ask for the serial numbers that are assigned to each one of those MDMs, and now you've got that organized by MDM or device management service. You can ask for the device management service for a specific device, and so on, right? So I don't have this open.
He's not gonna show you code for each one of those 8.
No, I don't think we have time. But I'm pulling this up quickly. Hopefully it works. In a different place than I was expecting, but this Apple developer documentation here has all the details around the APIs. And so you can see here, like if I, this has the steps for creating that API account. And then down here at the bottom, I think it links out to, no, I'll just go here. Apple Business Manager API, like here's the 8 endpoints that I just listed. And so, looking at one of these as an example, get the device serial numbers for a device management service. Okay, the thing that you need is you need this ID for the device management service. So you get that from this endpoint. That will give you a list of device management services with their IDs. Then you can use that ID in this endpoint to get any devices that are assigned to that specific device management service. Cool. You could use the bearer token, like in Postman, if you're familiar with that tool. You would still need all the code to, get up to the point where you can make the JWT request and get the access token back. But now you've got that access token. It's good for an hour, right? You could just use that wherever you like. So, here I have it in Postman. So I have a different token that I generated a while ago, and I can get the response here. So in this one, I've just got, everything. So you can see that data, like wrapper, as part of the dictionary there. And inside is this dictionary with all the individual devices in it. And we're looking at the same data that we saw come back from the Python file that I had. Okay. So just another way to do it, but this might be handy and useful. Here is the device management services API endpoint. So I can get a list back of, you'll notice it's called MDM servers here. So Apple's changing the terminology to device management service, but they didn't get the memo when they wrote the endpoint. So there you go. You can see details about this. And this ID number, that's what you would use to make other calls. Like I want to get all the devices that belong to a specific DMS, right? I could use that ID. So I've got it set up as a variable inside the Postman collection here in the environment variables. And I'm using a specific DMS so I can get a list of devices that are assigned to it. And now you've got a bunch of IDs. If you want to, get the details on each one of those, now you've got to make additional requests for each one to get the details. That way, you kind of build up whatever it is that you're trying to do. But you could see, like, if you're thinking about ServiceNow integrations, like, okay, let me take a serial number. If I don't have the AppleCare warranty info, let me make an API request to go get that for this specific device and populate the record here in ServiceNow or whatever asset management tool I'm using, add the AppleCare info and so on. Once you have it, it's probably not going to change, but you might want to run it on everything again later. But, certainly first run, you say, okay, well, which ones don't have AppleCare warranty info? As soon as that's available in Apple Business Manager, let me populate it. Maybe every 30 days or something, you check it again, see if it's changed, things like that. Okay, so I've shown you everything. Before we ask for feedback, I do have a couple minutes for questions. So any questions about what I've shown or how this works? In the back over here? Yep.
Talk right into it.
Just first of all, this session's been awesome, so thank you both. Have you come up against any rate limiting or throttling issues as you've been iterating through the endpoints?
So the question, in case it didn't come up on the mic, was, have I run into any rate limiting or issues like that? I have not. There is paging built into the API endpoint definitions, so you can set limits and page through the results if you're getting a lot. The test instance of Apple Business Manager that I'm using, or the one I'm using for testing, doesn't have a whole lot of devices in it, so it's under 100. So I haven't run into anything. I haven't run it against a production instance that has 50,000 devices in it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Another question. Go ahead and say it, and I'll just repeat it.
Not so much of a question, but can you show in Postman how you can actually have Postman show you the code in various languages?
Yeah. Okay. So the comment was Postman will show you how you could implement the request in Python or Bash or whatever. It's a built-in function there. It's really useful. I won't show it for time, but it's
We
there.
are out of time, so let's go to
Yeah.
the next slide.
This is the feedback form.
We swear it's not a Rickroll. This is really the. Please share the feedback with the conference organizers. They've worked so hard to put this on. The feedback means a lot to us. It means a lot to the conference. It means a lot to you all. So please share your feedback. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.